Have you ever noticed that some people seem to vanish from your life the moment you change something about yourself? They stop calling, they stop provoking, they stop engaging. Not because you confronted them or fought back, but because you did something quietly and internally, something very specific. Toxic people don't leave when you explain yourself better. They don't leave when you argue harder or prove your worth. They leave when their psychological leverage disappears, when they no longer have the same effect on you. Today, you're going to understand why toxic people disappear when you do this. Not from a motivational perspective, but from a psychological one. And once you see the mechanism behind it, you'll understand why some relationships were never meant to survive your growth. In everyday language, toxic is used loosely, often without a clear definition. In psychology, it refers to patterns, not personalities. You see, a toxic dynamic is one where a person repeatedly undermines your sense of self, violates emotional boundaries, creates confusion or guilt, and gains control through emotional reactions. Now, the key word here is pattern. Toxic people are not necessarily cruel all the time. They're often charming, engaging, and even supportive, but only when it benefits them. What makes the relationship toxic isn't who they are, but how the interaction functions. Toxic people don't need power over your life. They need power over your emotional state. Reactions are their currency. Anger, defensiveness, over-explaining, guilt, anxiety. Each emotional reaction confirms something important to them, that they matter, that they can influence you, that they are still relevant in your internal world. Now, this is not always conscious, but it is consistent. Many people believe that if they just explain themselves clearly enough, the toxic behavior will stop. Psychology actually shows the opposite. Arguments feed the dynamic. When you argue with a toxic person, you're still engaging on their terms, reacting emotionally, and validating the interaction. To them, conflict is not a problem. It's a proof of connection. Silence and neutrality are far more threatening than anger. Toxic interactions are often psychologically activating. Your body shifts into tension, constant alertness, and emotional readiness. For many toxic personalities, this intensity feels familiar. Chaos feels normal. Emotional spikes can feel like closeness, because intensity is mistaken for connection. When you remain calm, regulated, and grounded, something breaks. The interaction no longer matches their mental rhythm. One of the most confusing aspects of toxic relationships is how hard they are to let go of. Now, this isn't weakness, it's neurobiology. See, highly emotional interactions create spikes in stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, followed by moments of relief or validation. This unpredictable cycle conditions the nervous system. Psychologically, it mirrors intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Your brain begins to associate intensity with importance and chaos with connection. When you become calm and regulated, this biochemical loop collapses. What once felt exciting starts to feel exhausting, and without that chemistry, the bond loses its grip. So, what's the thing that causes toxic people to fade out? You stop providing emotional supply, not by ignoring them or becoming cold or cruel, but by becoming emotionally regulated and internally stable. You still communicate, you still respond, but your responses no longer carry emotional charge, and this changes everything. For many people, emotional neutrality feels unnatural. Psychology shows that not every emotion needs expression. When you stop reacting automatically, old patterns surface. Silence feels awkward. The urge to explain intensifies. This discomfort is temporary. What you're experiencing is withdrawal from a familiar emotional system. Here's the thing. You don't need to announce your change. Toxic people sense it instinctively. They notice shorter explanations, calmer tone, fewer justifications, and firmer boundaries. What disappears isn't communication, it's access. They can no longer pull you into emotional loops. Before toxic people disengage, they often escalate. They may provoke more aggressively, guilt trip more intensely, accuse you of changing, or claim that you're cold or distant. This isn't regression, it's loss of control. When old strategies fail, the system tries even harder. In psychology, this process is called extinction. When a behavior no longer produces the expected response, it eventually stops. No reaction means no reward. Without emotional payoff, the interaction loses purpose. The toxic dynamic collapses under its own weight. When emotional reactions stop working, guilt often becomes the final strategy. Guilt bypasses logic and targets your sense of responsibility. Statements like, "After everything I've done for you," those aren't requests for connection. They're attempts to restore emotional leverage. Healthy guilt is specific and repair-focused. Toxic guilt is vague, exaggerated, and endless. And when you no longer carry guilt that isn't yours, the dynamic has no entry point left. Healthy people don't disappear when you become emotionally stable. They often feel safer, more respected, and more connected. They adapt. Toxic people withdraw because the relationship no longer serves their psychological needs. And the contrast is quite revealing. Some worry that emotional neutrality is manipulative. It isn't. Manipulation is about controlling others. This is about self-regulation. You're not changing to affect them. You're changing to protect your internal balance. Their reaction is a side effect, not the goal. This is where the power dynamic finally shifts, often without you doing anything at all. When you stop reacting emotionally, something subtle but powerful happens. You begin to signal self-respect. Not verbally, not for show, but neurologically and behaviorally. Self-respect changes how others unconsciously position themselves around you. Toxic dynamics rely on imbalance. One person overfunctions emotionally, the other person underfunctions. When you regulate yourself, that imbalance disappears. You no longer chase clarity. You no longer seek validation. You no longer negotiate your worth. Psychologically, this removes the incentive to dominate, provoke, or destabilize. There's nothing left to gain from your reaction. Without imbalance, there is no leverage. And without leverage, the dynamic dissolves. Boundaries don't push people away. They clarify relationships. They reveal who respects limits, who adapts, and who depends on chaos. Boundaries don't end healthy connections. They end unhealthy ones. When toxic people disappear, they often leave behind a narrative. They say you changed, became distant, or are no longer the same. This reframing protects their self-image. Psychologically, it's self-preservation, a form of self-protection. After this shift, many people notice something unexpected. They feel stronger without trying to be strong. This is because emotional energy is no longer leaking outward. When you're not constantly anticipating reactions, managing moods, or explaining yourself, your nervous system conserves energy. Psychologically, this creates stability. You're present. Strength, in this sense, is not a force, it's the absence of inner conflict. And that quiet stability is deeply noticeable to others, even when nothing is said. Many people try to copy this externally. They go silent, they act distant, they suppress emotions. The toxic people sense the difference. If neutrality is acted rather than lived, it collapses under pressure. The real change is internal regulation. You're not withholding reactions. You no longer need them. When calm is genuine, the dynamic can't restart because there's nothing left to react to. Toxic people don't disappear because you reject them. They disappear because they can no longer reach you. Not emotionally, not psychologically, not internally. You didn't become cold. You became grounded. And when emotional manipulation no longer works, the dynamic has nowhere to go. If someone vanishes when you become calmer, clearer, and more self-contained, the relationship was never about connection. It was about access. And once that access is gone, so are they. Without emotional access, the dynamic can't survive.